Is Sony about to abandon PS Plus? There's a cool new feature Sony's working on for your PS5, and if you're going back and forth between the digital and disc edition, you might want to take a look at this video. How's it going, everyone? Welcome to PSReady, the channel all about PlayStation. I'm back in my normal environment here with the brick wall. This is the weekly news story where I take the 5 biggest news stories from around the world of PlayStation and deliver them straight to your eyeballs and ears. That sounded really weird. So first up, we're going to talk about SSDs. I don't need to tell you that for like a year now, you've been able to upgrade your PS5's internal SSD. Actually, it hasn't even been a year. It's been almost a year, but that was a really big update that came last September. It was in beta for a really long time. Sony had some mixed messaging out there. I remember when I did my first video on it, I actually used an SSD that didn't have a heatsink on it, and all you let me know down in the comments below. But weirdly enough, it worked perfectly fine, and it didn't seem to be overheating when I was transferring games back and forth. But long story short, I ended up getting sponsored by Samsung, who sent over a drive that did have a heatsink on it, and now I have a like 2.6 terabyte PS5, and I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty awesome. On the Xbox side of things, they have the storage upgrade card, which is supremely overpriced because it's only made by one company, which is Seagate. And if you get that, it's a 1 terabyte upgrade chip that you just plug into the back of your Xbox. It's really cool. It reminds me of the Nintendo 64 when you get the expansion packs for that. But like I mentioned, at 250 bucks, half the price of an Xbox Series X, it is massively overpriced. And the console you need it on is the Xbox Series S. And that kind of defeats the purpose if you're combining that $300 price point with the $250 storage expansion. At that point, you should just buy a Series X. So Sony's kind of stayed out of that realm, which I think is smart. They pretty much let any SSD work in the PS5, and they haven't actually had a branded PlayStation 5 SSD up until this point, until now. The weird thing is this drive has actually been around, and I'm gonna read it off my phone because it's got a weird name. It's the WD_black TM SN850 NVMe SSD. And aesthetically, if you put all the SSDs in a row, I think this one looks the coolest. It doesn't really matter though, because you can't see it when it's inside your PS5. I like the branding on the WD black stuff though, and this is kind of like the go-to drive for everyone who is doing articles and other videos and just any post you've seen online about an SSD upgrade for your PS5. This was the default, and it seems that Sony has paid attention now, because if you buy one of these drives that's made for the PS5, there'll be a nice little PlayStation logo sticker on there to let you know that you can buy it with peace of mind, and it's not going to melt the side of your PS5 off like all of you thought the original one I tried would. Ironically, it was an SN850, just not the one with the heatsink. And as far as the price goes, unlike Xbox, you're not paying a premium for a PlayStation branded product here, because it's in the same range as all of these other SSDs out there. So you can get the 1 terabyte version for $179, and you can get the 2 terabyte version for $280. That is pretty standard. On my Steam Deck, I just paid $280 for a 1 terabyte drive to go in there. So from that perspective, it seems like a really good deal. And yeah, just like I always tell you guys, I'll have this drive and every other compatible drive with the PS5 linked down in the description. So if you're looking for a new SSD, or you want to preemptively buy one while you search in pain for a PS5 in the store, use those links in the description, because they give me a little bit of a kickback, and then I can afford to buy thousands of games I will not play. Because right now I am just on that God of War hype train. I'm replaying the 2018 one, and I'm so excited for God of War Ragnarok. And if you want to pre-order it, I also have a link down in the description for that. So I don't think I'm going to yuck anyone's yum if I say that the last few months of PlayStation Plus free games haven't been all that great. It made sense because Sony was leading up to the new revamped version of PlayStation Plus. There's a lot of games that were going to be included in the library there. So why would Sony give them away in a forever way, right? Like if they gave them away before they revamped PS Plus, that's on your account forever. But if they put them in this library, them and all the other publishers have the opportunity to take these games out of the library. Like, I don't know, when a new game in that series becomes announced or available, then they can charge you for the old game if you want to pick that up, instead of relying on you to subscribe to the service. If you didn't think of that idea, Sony, you're welcome. Everyone else, I'm sorry. But even with this new library of games, the essential games we've been getting since this relaunch have all been largely really good, and it doesn't seem like things are stopping with last month. So the rumored games we have upcoming on PlayStation Plus Essential and Extra and Premium, I guess, because you get the same features throughout the entire thing are Stray, Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate, Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, Unity, Rogue Remastered, Freedom Cry, the Ezio Collection, and Saints Row 4 Re-Elected. So all of these games are being added to the extra tier, and that's on top of the essential games you already got in July, which are Crash Bandicoot 4 and the Dark Pictures Man of Medan, which honestly, this might be the best PS Plus month of all time if you combine all of these games up. I mean, we got God of War very recently. That was a great one, but just the sheer quantity of great games you have this July, if you're in the extra tier, it's kind of insane. Because I remember when Assassin's Creed Unity came out, it was a huge mess. There was that meme going around where it was like the hair of the guy's head and then his eyeballs and his teeth were floating, and that was just like the meme that was shared into oblivion. But Ubisoft, as much as I hate giving Ubisoft credit these days, they hunkered down, they fixed that game, and I see TikToks all the time now of people playing co-op Assassin's Creed in Unity, because that one had by far the best parkour in the entire series, bar none. It was so smooth, so cool looking, and being able to just run around and assassinate people in Paris with friends was awesome. So if you never gave it a shot, even though it's a PS4 launch title, I would suggest checking it out once it's added to PlayStation Plus Extra. Crash Bandicoot 4 hit me right in the nostalgia. They did such a good job making that feel like a successor to the Naughty Dog Crash Bandicoot games, and they did just as good of a job on the Crash Insane trilogy. So yeah, it sucks that Activision looked at all that potential success and said, yup, Crash 4, that's the end of it. We made a great game for once, so we got to go back to making mediocrity. So yeah, while the launch was a little shaky for PlayStation Plus Essential, Extra, and Premium, I think things are evening out just fine, and I'm probably going to subscribe to one of those higher tiers. I have a lot of these games on my PlayStation account, but I don't have Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate, and I kind of want to see how that plays on the PS5, because I've been loving it on the Steam Deck, but I feel like that game is so cinematic, it'll look awesome on the PlayStation 5. Which, after this story, it brings me to the next one, which is an opinion piece I saw online that made me kind of scratch my head. It basically said Sony doesn't care about PlayStation Plus, they really only care about selling consoles. And initially, I kind of saw where the person was coming from, because if you compare PlayStation Plus to Xbox's Game Pass, it's not really an apples to apples situation, because Xbox puts all of their day one exclusives onto Game Pass. Obviously, right now, that isn't really helping them all that much, because they had to delay the two biggest games they were going to release this year, Redfall and Starfield, into 2023. And now they're kind of sitting on their hands, like, what do we release? While Sony is just eating up the fall release slate with The Last of Us Part 1 and God of War Ragnarok. So yeah, from that perspective, it kind of seems like Sony is more concerned with selling new games instead of subscription services, which kind of makes sense. But in my opinion, they're doing a good job on both fronts. I mean, when you look at The Last of Us Part 1, the easy criticism there is that it's not worth $70, and I'll be the judge of that, I think, for myself when it comes out, but I kind of agree that they're overcharging a little bit for it. They say they rebuilt it from the ground up for PlayStation 5, and it does look a lot better, but they're keeping the game pretty much one-to-one exactly the same from the story beat perspective. So no matter how much they really do in the graphics department, it's going to feel probably like a remaster versus a full-on remake. I do like that they're updating the face textures and just the motion capture itself. They're able to go back and kind of smooth it out. I think that's really cool. And they've also said they're updating the combat as well, which is great. It just, when you compare it to the remastered version we got on the PlayStation 4, which runs at 4K 60 frames per second on the PS5, it's looking a little lacking, considering that was also $60 and came along with the Factions multiplayer. And all we have for the new Factions multiplayer is a screenshot of San Francisco, which, like, I don't know. I'm excited for that. I'm just bummed out it's as far away as it is. I thought that would be out at the end of the year with The Last of Us Part 1, but it looks like Sony's planning on releasing that a lot closer to The Last of Us TV show. And of course, not having a game like God of War Ragnarok on the service day one, that's just basically confirming what they already said, where it devalues their games. I talked about a really similar situation on my horror channel. So Halloween 2018 came out and it did like insane numbers. That movie cost $10 million and they made like $250 million when it was all said and done. Then of course, Halloween Kills, the second one, had to be delayed, and leading up to it, it looked like the hype was really building. It looked like it was going to do as well as 2018 in theaters, even though it happened right when theaters really started opening back up. And then Universal made this weird decision to just drop it on Peacock day one, and it really hurt the movie overall because people still turned up at the theaters to see it, and it ended up making like 170 million. But a bunch of people also watched it on Peacock where you could just get a free subscription for a month, and yeah, it cheapens the brand, and now Universal's kind of sitting there not really sure how Halloween Ends is going to perform when it comes out this year. So yeah, when you're releasing your games for free on a streaming service, even though you're paying for the service, in a lot of people's minds, that cheapens the brand overall. And we're seeing a ton of detrimental effects over on the Xbox side, like with Halo Infinite, for example. The fact that the multiplayer is free to play standalone is kind of what's killing that game, because you buy the full disc package, right, for 60 bucks if you don't have Game Pass, and all you're really getting is the campaign. And when you're playing through the campaign, it looks like you're unlocking multiplayer cosmetics, but then you head over into the multiplayer and it's not armor skins, it's not anything cool like that, or gun skins. It's like charms and emotes and sprays for the wall. And I just thought that was a huge missed opportunity. So yeah, I think it's a good thing that Sony is focusing on the boxed releases, but at the same time creating a good streaming service that has older games that people might have missed. Because when I was a kid, there were tons of games I wanted to play and I couldn't afford every new game that came out, so I had to put a lot of games on my used or platinum hits list to wait for Christmas to ask for. And if like PlayStation Plus Premium was out when I was a kid, I wouldn't have had to wait, and that's pretty cool. So in my last video, we talked about this new patent that PlayStation has going on where they're going to make some accessories that are from PlayStation's past, like the iToy, for example, or maybe even a DualShock 2, compatible with the PlayStation 5 for some of these backwards compatible games. It's a really smart move on their part, but it doesn't look like they're stopping there with cool features. So another patent they've just filed for is what's being called the what if feature. So say you're playing through The Last of Us Part 2 and you get to that part where you're playing as Abby and you're in the basement of the hospital and there's that big monster that's like, I think it's called the Rat King or something like that. It's just a big like glommed together ball of clickers, and it chases you around and beats the shit out of you, and you gotta fight with a flamethrower, and it's awesome. It's like the best part of that game in my opinion. But then imagine you get to the end of that fight and there's like a quick time event, or there's like a corner you locked yourself in and the Rat King manages to kill you graphically like it happens in the game. All right, so what this new feature would do is say, all right, you just died at this part of the game. It would use AI to like scan your gameplay and say, here's what you did wrong, here's what you could have done better. And then when you hit the next checkpoint, the game has actually taught you how to get through that fight. Now, obviously that would have to be an optional feature because it would kind of suck and take all the challenge and fun out of games if, like, say in Elden Ring, you're fighting a really hard boss and then you died and the game's like, here's exactly how to beat him. I'll save you 5 seconds of looking on YouTube, and you couldn't do anything about it. That would suck. But with this, having it as an option, there are a ton of games where I would definitely use this feature, like Hotline Miami 2, for example. That's a one hit, you're dead both ways type game. And knowing a path through a level that I've been stuck on for a few hours, that would really help out. Another recent example that's not from when I was in college is Tunic, the last boss in that game. If I had to make a list of like my mortal enemies, it would be this guy from high school who's like a huge bully, and then the final boss in Tunic. That thing fucking sucks. It was impossible. I even did the thing where I played through the last boss and I was like, I'm gonna go to bed and then I'm gonna wake up tomorrow and I'm gonna beat him on the first try. And I did not beat him on the first try. The tried and true method did not work. So eventually I looked it up on YouTube. I found out there's a way to like corner lock him and then you can just beat shit out of him until he's dead, and that worked out great. So having this feature on my PlayStation 5, instead of making me pull out my phone, open up the YouTube app, scroll through some guy's 20-minute video where he's like, hey guys, in today's video, I'm gonna tell you exactly how to beat the final boss in Tunic, but before that, I'm gonna talk about t-shirts or something like that. That'd be great to just have my PS5 have that feature built in. I hope you agree. And the last news story I have for you guys today is basically a suggestion if you haven't gotten a PS5 yet and you're looking at the digital one and you're like, man, I think I could save $100 here and get it a little bit easier. You might want to wait and just get the disc edition of the PS5, and here's why. So in recent news, there have been a ton of examples of games that you've added to your PlayStation account or your Steam account that are getting revoked, even if you have them downloaded to your console. You might not even be able to play them anymore. The last one I talked about was The Matrix Awakens. That was basically like an Unreal Engine 5 tech demo that came along with an open world map. It was actually really cool. I had a ton of fun playing around with the mod for it, where you get to be Superman and fly around the city. Another example on the Sony end is movies that you bought on your PlayStation, which I never use this feature, but on the PS3 and PS4, you were able to buy movies and download them to your PS4 and just watch them that way, and you'd have them stored in your PlayStation account. But Sony recently closed down that store, and it seemed like they were just going to let people keep those movies in their account. But now, as it turns out, they're revoking access, like they're revoking licenses to movies that are in people's accounts, and people are rightfully pissed pissed off about this. And this is extending to games as well, specifically with Ubisoft. We love shitting on them here because they're just the worst lately. But basically, they did an HD version of Assassin's Creed Liberation, which was the Vita Assassin's Creed game. And not only are they removing it from sale on Steam, the PC version, they also have a little note there on the Steam page that says it's going to be revoked from people's accounts who previously bought the game. And this has kind of happened in a similar way before with Alan Wake, which is one of my favorite games ever. They had to delist that game from Steam at one point a few years ago because they lost the license to music within the game, and it didn't look like they were going to fix it and put the game back on there. But at that point, they let you keep your version of the game. So even when they eventually re-added it with that music taken out, if you originally bought it, like back in the day before it was initially removed, you got to keep the version that had the music with licenses revoked. So knowing that's happening on Steam, there's nothing to say Sony can't just dig into your PlayStation account at the behest of like Ubisoft or Activision or EA and just remove the license that you have for something like Modern Warfare 2. Like say you bought Modern Warfare 2 on your PS3 digitally, and then when Modern Warfare 2 Remastered came out, they said, yeah, we're ending support for Modern Warfare 2, and now that the Remastered is out, we're just gonna take that out of your account, and then you'll have to rebuy this new version of the game at a discount. That's totally something that can happen on the PlayStation digital store, but it's something that can't happen if you have the Modern Warfare 2 disc. Now, as time goes on, we're seeing a lot of games come out where it's just like a license file on the disc, sort of like how PC used to work. Halo Infinite is a great example where if you buy that game on disc, there's nothing on the disc. It's literally like a license check that happens on your Xbox and allows you to download the entire game. But there are other games where if you buy them and put them in your PlayStation 5, the entire game is stored on that disc. So while, yeah, you've got to move it over to your SSD to play it, it's still stored on the disc. So if that game ever went away in the future, you would have at least some way to play it. Now, you won't have the patches like the day one patch that every game has now or any of the DLC, but a lot of the time you can at least get through the game start to finish. And unless it's an online thing like Destiny, there are more and more games coming out that support stuff like that. And I love on the Nintendo Switch side of things, you get these releases like The Witcher 3 where they released it and the whole game, everything, the game, the patches, the DLC was on the Switch cartridge. They used a bigger cartridge to make that happen. And when they eventually released a patch, they made it very clear it was just a slight performance upgrade. And if you just wanted to play off the cartridge and not max out your storage by downloading this huge patch, you could totally get away with that just fine. I would love to see that extend over to PS5, but for now, I'm really bummed that Sony is revoking digital licenses. And yeah, if you're looking at the digital PS5 or the disc one, it's gonna come in a lot handier next generation. I'm telling you, if you just buy the disc one and stick to buying physical games. Hey, you might get something like Godzilla PS4 where it's like worth $500 now on eBay. You never know.